The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the natural kind you get in an empty room, but that hollow, public silence that swallows you whole when the world around you keeps moving but you're standing still. I was in the middle of the departure terminal, surrounded by strangers tugging suitcases, calling out to kids, fumbling with passports. The hum of rolling luggage wheels and muffled boarding announcements filled the air. But for me, everything had gone quiet. The gate agent was still talking, though her voice felt far away. "Sir, your name isn't on the passenger list," she said, her tone polite but mechanical, like she'd delivered the same line 100 times that day. I slid my printed boarding pass across the counter again. She barely glanced at it before shaking her head. I pulled out my phone, bringing up the confirmation email, the one with my name in bold, the one I'd received weeks ago after booking the trip. "This is my ticket," I told her. "Paid for, confirmed. Same cruise, same group. They should have checked in just before me, Ethan and Melissa." She looked at the email, her expression not changing. "I'm sorry, sir, but according to our system, this booking has been modified. You're not listed as a traveling passenger. The reservation now shows 2 guests only." 2 guests. I didn't need her to say their names. I knew. Somewhere beyond security, my grandson Ethan and his new wife Melissa were boarding a flight to Miami. The first leg of their Caribbean honeymoon. The same honeymoon I'd offered to pay for entirely. The same honeymoon I had been invited to join. The boarding call for their flight echoed over the speakers. Final call. Passengers to gate C12. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't made a mistake. They'd removed me. The truth hit with a strange combination of cold and heat. Cold in my chest because it was Ethan, my grandson, someone I'd raised like my own son after his father died. Heat crawling up my neck because I was standing there, publicly humiliated, holding a ticket that was no longer worth the paper it was printed on. The agent's attention had already shifted to the next person in line. I stepped aside, the sounds of the terminal rushing back in, louder now. A family wrangled their twins toward security. A businessman argued on his phone. Somewhere, a barista called out a coffee order. All of it blurred as I stood there, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle into place. It hadn't started this way. 3 months earlier, at their engagement dinner, Ethan and Melissa had been all smiles and gratitude. I'd been the one to make the offer. "Let me cover your honeymoon. Anywhere you want to go. Flights, hotel, everything. My treat." I'd said it without hesitation. Melissa's hand had flown to her mouth in surprise, and Ethan had leaned over to hug me. "Grandpa, that's amazing," he'd said. I'd shrugged it off. "You only get married once. Start it right." They'd spent weeks discussing destinations. Paris, Bali, Hawaii. In the end, they chose a 7-day Caribbean cruise, departing from Miami. I figured it was a good choice. Plenty to see, good food, easy travel. When Ethan called to tell me the decision, he added, "Grandpa, you should come too. Make it a family honeymoon." Melissa had been on speakerphone, and I remember the momentary pause before she chimed in with, "Oh, sure, that could be nice." Her voice was even, but something in it made me pause. I told myself not to read into it. Weddings are stressful. People get tired, distracted. I didn't want to be the suspicious old man imagining slights where none existed. I ignored the little knot in my stomach. Over the next few weeks, I paid for everything. Their cruise tickets, their flights, their pre-cruise hotel in Miami, excursions, even travel insurance. When I booked my own ticket, I made sure to coordinate with theirs, same flights, same hotel, same ship. Now, standing in that terminal, watching the clock tick toward their departure time, I realized just how carefully this had been done. Someone had gone into that booking and deliberately removed me, and whoever had done it had counted on me finding out too late to do anything about it. They were right, at least for now. When I got home from the airport that day, I didn't throw my bag in anger or pace the hallway like some wounded animal. That's not my way. I set it down in the foyer, hung my jacket neatly, and sat at the kitchen table. It wasn't the cost that stung. I could afford it, though it was no small expense. What cut deep was the calculation it took to make this happen. This wasn't a last-minute change or a forgotten email. It was deliberate, done with enough forethought to make sure I couldn't stop it. I made coffee, strong and black, and thought back over the past few months. The signs had been there. The first came after the engagement dinner. Ethan had stopped by a few days later, alone. We sat in the living room, the afternoon light stretching long across the carpet. He told me Melissa was so excited about the honeymoon, then hesitated before adding, "She's just worried about, well, you know, it's her first big trip as a married woman. She thought maybe it should feel more like just us." It was the first time I heard the note in his voice, the kind that comes when someone is speaking for someone else. I'd smiled, keeping my tone light. "If she wants it to be just the two of you, I understand. But you invited me, Ethan." He'd looked away, fiddling with his watch. No, we want you there. It'll be fun. Just, you know how brides get about their plans." I didn't push it. I told myself it was nerves, that she'd come around. The second sign came when I noticed Melissa's mother's name on the hotel booking in Miami. I'd booked the rooms myself, one for me, one for Ethan and Melissa, and the next week, I received a confirmation update showing 2 additional rooms, both under Melissa's parents' names. I assumed they'd be seeing the couple off, maybe spending a day or 2 in the city before heading home. When I mentioned it to Ethan, he gave a quick, vague answer. "Oh yeah, they'll be there for a bit, just a send-off." I wanted to believe it, but a send-off didn't usually require booking the same pre-cruise hotel as the honeymooners. The third sign came a week before departure. I'd sent Ethan a text asking if they wanted to ride to the airport together. Hours passed before he replied, "We're actually going earlier. Melissa wants to get there ahead of time for something with the cruise check-in. We'll meet you at the gate." I said fine. I even arrived at the airport an hour early, thinking maybe we could grab a coffee before boarding. I never saw them. Now, sitting at my kitchen table with my untouched coffee cooling in front of me, the pieces began to fit together. Melissa had never wanted me there. She tolerated the idea because I was paying for the trip, but she'd been looking for a way to remove me from the equation without looking like the villain. She hadn't needed to look far. Ethan, for all his charm, had a history of avoiding confrontation. It wouldn't have taken much for her to convince him that this was for the best. Still, I didn't know the full story. Did they think I'd just accept this quietly? That I'd fade into the background, letting the humiliation sit unanswered? They didn't know me as well as they thought. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. My mind wasn't racing exactly, more like working through a checklist. I'd spent enough of my life in insurance investigations to know that answers rarely come to those who stomp their feet and demand them. They come to those who move quietly, gather details, and connect dots in their own time. I started with the cruise line. I called their customer service, keeping my tone casual. "I'm just confirming a booking change," I said, giving them my original reservation number. After a moment, the agent cheerfully confirmed it. My name had been removed from the booking 12 days earlier. The change had been made online, logged under Ethan's account. 12 days ago, I repeated, as if I were trying to remember something. "Yes, sir. Would you like me to send the updated itinerary to the email we have on file?" "No, that's fine. I'll find it." 12 days before the trip, Ethan and I had been sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee, talking about which shore excursions sounded best. He'd smiled the whole time, not a flicker of guilt. I made my second call to the hotel in Miami. The receptionist was polite, confirming that my room had also been canceled. Same date, same online change request. She mentioned the other rooms in the reservation were still active. Melissa's parents' names were on 2 of them. Melissa's parents. We'd never been close, but they'd been polite enough at family gatherings. I tried to picture them in this plot. Had they known? Were they the ones boarding with Ethan and Melissa while I was being left behind at the gate? By mid-morning, I had my notes spread across the kitchen table. Dates, times, names. I wasn't sure yet what I intended to do with it all, but I knew I wasn't going to let it slide. I called an old friend from my working days, Alan. We'd both spent years in the field, him on the law enforcement side, me on the insurance side. Alan had a way of finding things without leaving footprints. "Need a favor?" he asked, his voice warm but curious. Just some quiet checking. A cruise leaving Miami yesterday. Passengers Ethan and Melissa Collins, plus 2 others, likely her parents. I want to know if they boarded, and I want to know if my name ever appeared on that final manifest. Alan didn't press for details. Give me a day. The rest of the afternoon, I kept my hands busy, fixing a loose hinge on the kitchen cabinet, sweeping the porch, refilling the bird feeder. But my mind kept circling the same questions. Why invite me at all if they didn't want me there? Why not just take the gift and go alone? The humiliation felt intentional, like they wanted me to feel excluded, not just absent. That night, I didn't sleep much. At 6 a.m., Alan called. They all boarded, he said. Ethan, Melissa, her parents. Your name wasn't on the manifest. Thanks, I told him. I hung up and sat in the quiet, the morning light spilling across the table. Now I knew. This wasn't an oversight, and it wasn't just Melissa pushing for space. It was coordinated, done cleanly, efficiently, and clean work deserves a clean response. After Alan's call, the last traces of doubt disappeared. They'd all boarded together, Ethan, Melissa, her parents, and my name had been erased before the trip even began. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't a mix-up. It was coordinated. I spent that morning walking through the house, letting the weight of it settle. I didn't feel like shouting or demanding explanations over the phone. That would only give them the chance to dodge, to spin a story before I had them in front of me. No, this needed to be face-to-face on my terms. Their ship was due back in Miami on Sunday morning. From there, they'd fly home in the afternoon. I checked their return itinerary. Yes, I still had access to the booking information despite being removed as a passenger. That told me everything I needed about their carelessness. I wanted them in my home, sitting at my dining table, the same place where so many family decisions had been made over the years. They'd have to look me in the eye. They'd have to see the proof laid out in front of them. I made my preparations like I used to prepare a case file. First, I printed every receipt, flights, hotel, cruise tickets, each one showing I'd paid in full. Then I printed the updated booking records, complete with the timestamp of when my name was deleted. 12 days before departure. I placed each document in its own clear sleeve and arranged them in neat stacks. In the center of the table, I set one envelope. Inside was a photocopy of Ethan and Melissa's cruise ticket, the price blacked out except for the line in bold. Paid by Robert Hale. I didn't call them while they were away. No texts, no questions about the trip, no hint of what I knew. Silence can be louder than confrontation. Let them think I'd either not noticed or decided not to care. Let them walk off that ship thinking they'd gotten away with it. On Saturday night, the eve of their return, I finally made my move. I called Ethan. He picked up quickly, his voice bright. Hey, Grandpa. We're still out at sea, back tomorrow. I kept my tone flat. You and Melissa come by the house Monday morning. 9 o'clock. We have something to discuss. A pause. I imagined him glancing toward Melissa, measuring her reaction. Sure. Everything okay? It will be, I said. 9 o'clock. I hung up before he could answer. Then I stood in the doorway of the dining room, looking at the table, at the evidence waiting in perfect order. The stage was set. All that was left was for them to step into it. Monday morning arrived crisp and bright, the kind of early autumn day where the air feels cleaner than usual. I'd been awake since before sunrise, not because of nerves, but because I wanted everything in place. The dining room table sat exactly as I'd left it the night before. Papers neatly stacked, the envelope dead center. At 8:45, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't look out the window right away. Let them come to the door. Let them feel the pause before I answered. The doorbell rang at 8:47. I opened it to find Ethan standing with his hands in his pockets. Melissa just behind him, wearing oversized sunglasses despite the mild morning light. Her expression was unreadable, but the stiffness in her shoulders spoke volumes. Morning, Grandpa, Ethan said, trying for casual. I stepped aside. Come in. They followed me to the dining room. Ethan glanced at the table, his smile faltering just slightly when he saw the organized stacks of paper. Melissa took the chair opposite mine, Ethan sitting beside her. I didn't sit yet. You both know why you're here, I said. Ethan shifted in his seat. Grandpa, if this is about the trip, it is. I cut in, keeping my voice even. And I want to hear your version of it before I explain mine. They exchanged a quick glance. Melissa spoke first. There was a mix-up with the booking. We tried to fix it, but it was too close to the departure date. We figured it was better to just go as planned and sort it out later. I finally took my seat, folding my hands on the table. A mix-up, I repeated. 12 days before departure, my name was removed from the cruise booking. The same day, my hotel reservation in Miami was canceled. Both changes made under Ethan's account. Ethan's jaw tightened. It wasn't. I slid the first set of papers toward them. Receipts for the flights, hotel, and cruise. All paid by me. Bank statements to match. And here, I passed over the updated booking records. Is the confirmation of the cancellations, timestamped. No mix-up. No mistake. Melissa kept her eyes on the papers, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan leaned back in his chair, looking anywhere but at me. You could have told me you didn't want me there, I said. It would have been ugly, but at least it would have been honest. Grandpa, it wasn't like that, Ethan said finally, his voice low. Melissa just thought. Melissa shot him a look, sharp enough to stop him mid-sentence. We wanted the honeymoon to be just us, she said flatly. And my parents. They've been looking forward to a trip for years. It made sense to leave the person who paid for it standing at an airport gate. I finished for her. She didn't respond. I leaned back, letting the silence fill the room. You could have chosen anywhere in the world. You could have taken the gift and gone without me. But you chose to humiliate me instead. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. We didn't think. That much is clear. I tapped the envelope in the center of the table. Inside is a copy of your cruise ticket. Price blacked out except for one line. Paid by Robert Hale. You'll keep it as a reminder of who made that trip possible. Melissa crossed her arms. So what now? You want an apology? I stood. What I want is for you both to leave. And to remember this moment the next time you think about crossing me. Neither of them moved right away. Eventually, Ethan stood, murmuring something I couldn't catch. Melissa followed, her heels clicking against the hardwood as they walked out. When the door closed, I returned to the dining room. The papers were still neatly stacked, untouched. Evidence in case I ever needed it again. I've learned over the years that real consequences aren't about shouting someone down in the moment. Words fade. What lasts is when you quietly adjust the balance in a way they can feel every single day. After they left, I sat at the table for a long while, not replaying the conversation, but thinking through my next steps. They'd shown me who they were. Melissa, calculating and unashamed. Ethan, willing to follow along rather than stand up. That wasn't something an apology could fix. It was something that needed boundaries. The first was financial. I'd been helping Ethan since he graduated. Small loans, covering the gap on his rent once or twice, slipping him cash for birthdays. Those days were over. That night, I called my bank and had his name removed as an authorized user on my account. I canceled the supplementary credit card he'd had for emergencies. The second was legal. My will and estate plan hadn't been updated in 5 years. On Tuesday morning, I called my lawyer. We spent 2 hours going over every detail. Ethan's name came off the primary list of beneficiaries. The share that would have gone to him now went to a scholarship fund in his father's name. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I no longer trusted him to honor anything I left behind. The third step was more subtle. I knew Melissa and her parents were proud of that trip, the kind who'd plaster photos all over social media. Alan, ever the helpful friend, was able to download every public picture they posted from the cruise. Each one showed them smiling, dressed for dinner, lounging on the deck. I filed them away with the receipts and cancellation records. Proof Should I ever need to explain to the rest of the family why Ethan wasn't invited to Thanksgiving? A week passed before I heard from him again. It was a text. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a minute before replying. Everything that needed to be said has been said. No response came back. Over the next month, I heard bits and pieces from other relatives. Melissa was telling people there had been a miscommunication, that I'd misunderstood. But I knew better. And slowly, others began to see the gaps in her story, the way she dodged specifics when asked. I didn't need to convince anyone. I just kept living my life, quiet and steady, while their version unraveled on its own. Actions have a way of echoing. And this echo was only just beginning. It started small, as these things often do. At first, it was just a shift in tone when their names came up during phone calls. My sister-in-law, who usually spoke fondly of Ethan, mentioned that he'd been keeping to himself lately. A cousin asked if I'd heard the odd story about their honeymoon arrangements. I didn't feed it, but I didn't stop it either. I learned long ago that silence can invite curiosity. People fill gaps in their understanding with whatever scraps they have. And scraps were exactly what Melissa had left them. 2 weeks after our meeting, the family gathered for my niece's birthday. I went, not out of obligation, but because it was my niece. She's young enough not to be tangled in adult politics. Ethan and Melissa were there, sitting off to one side. They looked diminished somehow. Ethan's usual easy charm was muted. Melissa still smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. At one point, my cousin Leah pulled me aside. "I have to ask, what happened between you and Ethan?" He said there was a misunderstanding about the trip, but... She trailed off, her expression skeptical. I didn't offer details. "Let's just say I have the receipts, Leah. All of them." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "That's what I thought." Later, I caught Melissa watching me from across the room. She looked away when our eyes met, focusing instead on rearranging a platter of cupcakes that didn't need rearranging. Ethan avoided me entirely. By the end of the evening, I'd spoken to nearly everyone there except the two of them. And without me saying a word about what had happened, the shift in the air was obvious. Conversations that once flowed easily toward them now skirted around. Invitations that might have been extended before were left unspoken. The next week, I heard from Alan again. "By the way," he said, "I saw your grandson's car for sale online. You think they're strapped for cash?" I didn't answer directly. "People make choices," I said. It wasn't my doing. But it was interesting to watch the slow erosion, not just of their finances but of their place in the family. Trust, once cracked, doesn't mend with polite excuses. The real punishment wasn't me confronting them or cutting them off. It was them realizing, day by day, that the story they tried to craft wasn't holding. That every person who mattered could see the edges fraying. And I didn't have to lift a finger. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Ethan finally called. Not texted. Called. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice calm, almost detached. "Grandpa, can we meet?" His tone was hesitant, the kind of voice a man uses when he's not sure how the answer will land. "I'm listening," I said. There's been a lot of talk in the family about the trip. I just think we should clear the air." I leaned back in my chair, watching the rain streak the window. The air is already clear on my end. A pause, long enough for me to hear him swallow. "It's not what you think. Melissa." "I know exactly what it was, Ethan, and you had a choice." He didn't argue. That silence told me more than any excuse could. "I don't think Melissa's handling all this well," he said finally. "She's upset about how people are treating us." "That tends to happen when people see through you," I replied. Another pause. "Can we at least come over and talk?" I considered it. Letting them in now would mean reopening a wound I had no interest in reopening. But refusing them might be more powerful than any lecture I could give. "No," I said simply. "You've already said everything you needed to say, and I've already heard it." His voice dropped. "This is going to make things harder, you know? For you, maybe," I said and ended the call. That weekend, Melissa tried her hand. She sent a long email. polite on the surface, but dripping with passive-aggressive phrasing. She wrote about how hurtful rumors were damaging relationships, how she wished certain people wouldn't twist the truth without knowing the full story. She didn't mention the airport, the cancellations, or the tickets. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to Alan, adding only, "File this with the others." 2 days later, I saw a post on social media from one of Melissa's friends. Photos from the cruise, complete with comments about the perfect family trip. I knew she'd posted it for her own circle, but the internet doesn't have walls. Within hours, those pictures were circulating among relatives who'd already started to question their version of events. By the following week, I noticed something telling. Melissa's mother, once quick to greet me at gatherings, avoided my eye completely at a church event. Word travels, and when it's carried on truth, it doesn't need my help to spread. I could feel it now, the shift in power. They were no longer in control of the story, and they knew it. After Melissa's email and the social media photos, I knew they were still trying to salvage their image. But the calls had stopped. No more invitations to talk things out. No more attempts to reframe what happened. It was quiet now, and quiet can be the perfect time to make a line permanent. The opportunity came in the form of a family group message. My niece was organizing a get-together for late January, something casual at her place. She'd invited almost everyone, including Ethan and Melissa. I waited a day before replying. "I'll be there," I wrote, "but I won't share a table with those who have shown they can't be trusted." No names. I didn't need to write them. The message was clear enough. Within an hour, I got 3 private messages from relatives, each some variation of "I understand." Not one person told me I was wrong. A few days later, Ethan called again. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Grandpa, I know you're upset, but you can't just cut us out like this. We're family." I listened twice, noting the shift in his tone. It wasn't defensive now, it was anxious. Not because he'd lost me emotionally, because he'd begun to feel the isolation in the wider family. I didn't call back. Instead, I wrote him a letter, short, handwritten, deliberate. "Ethan, trust is built over years and lost in seconds. You chose Melissa's comfort over honesty, and you did it in a way that stripped me of dignity. This isn't anger, it's clarity. You made your decision, and I'm making mine." I signed it simply, Robert. No grandpa, no warmth. I mailed it the next day. The silence that followed was different this time. Not the kind that waits for a response, but the kind that accepts there won't be one. I'd drawn the boundary. The rest would fall into place on its own. The January gathering came and went without Ethan and Melissa. I didn't ask why they weren't there, and no one volunteered an explanation. It didn't matter. The absence spoke for itself. Over the next months, their names surfaced less and less in family conversations. When they did, it was usually in passing, with the kind of tone people use for distant acquaintances rather than close kin. The shift was complete. I kept the folder, every receipt, every time-stamped cancellation record, every printed photograph from that trip. It stayed in the bottom drawer of my desk, not because I needed it now, but because I wanted it close. Proof in case they ever tried to rewrite history again. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I found myself flipping through it, not with anger, but with the calm of a man who has outlasted the storm. The airport humiliation that had burned so hot that day now felt like a scar. Still visible, but no longer painful to touch. I didn't block their numbers, though they rarely called. I didn't unfriend them online, though their posts were few and far between. I left those doors unlocked on purpose, not as an invitation, but as a reminder that they were the ones who'd walked out. The family kept moving forward. Holidays came, and I hosted them without hesitation. There were fewer seats needed now, but the laughter was genuine. No one tiptoed around unspoken tensions. One evening, as I stood by the fire after everyone had gone home, I realized something important. I hadn't punished them. I hadn't needed to. Life had done that work for me. Their absence was their own doing, and every empty chair at the table was a truth they'd have to live with. Sometimes the sharpest revenge isn't about taking something from someone. It's about letting them see what they've lost. while you keep everything that matters. And that, I decided, was the end of it.